This is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm one of the most experienced IVF doctors in Australia. I believe that an important part that I can contribute is to educate patients in relation to fertility, infertility, and all that involves. These series of podcasts help to educate you. I hope they are helpful to you. If you wish to know more, however, I'm more than happy to have you contact me via email, which is profmchapman@gmail.com, or make an appointment to see me on 9138 4222. In Australia, each year, something like 20,000 women go through an IVF cycle. On average, they'll do 2 or 3 cycles. So in Australia, there's nearly 80,000 cycles of IVF undertaken. Why IVF? You'll get to the point of IVF after all other options have been excluded or tried, because I see, and certainly my colleagues at Life Fertility see IVF as the end of the road. In my years of experience, probably a third of the patients that I see never get to IVF. They don't need it. And it's important to do the easy things first and get pregnancies, and then you don't need to come on to IVF. But having excluded those possibilities, and I suppose one of my concerns, and I say this quite often, is that many specialists who are not properly trained see IVF as the first step when a woman presents with difficulty getting pregnant. It's certainly not. However, when you get to that point where your specialist hopefully has excluded everything else, getting onto the cycle and going through a cycle is what we're going to talk about. So the underlying principles of an IVF cycle are that we try and get as many eggs as possible to make the greatest chance of producing an embryo or embryos that will get you pregnant. Not every egg released each month, the one egg that you produce each month, will make a pregnancy. At best, 15% of fertile cycles end up with a baby. So when we go to IVF, what we're doing is trying to truncate that one egg a month to being multiple eggs, and therefore increasing that 15% to, in these days, something in the order of 35 to 40% chance with one embryo transferred. And for about half the cycles, we'll end up with another embryo out of that same cycle. So giving you another chance of 30 to 40%. So from one cycle, we're talking over 65% chance of a baby. In preparing for your cycle, the important thing is to be realistic. The numbers I just quoted you, 35 to 40% chance, means that there's a 60 to 65% chance it won't work. So you might say, why do I bother? Comparing it with the 15%, and in a natural conception situation, it's pretty good. And certainly far better than when I started doing IVF, where 10% was thought to be good. That concept of getting as many eggs as possible is number one. How do we achieve that? That's achieved by stimulating your ovaries, by giving you the equivalent hormones that your brain, your pituitary gland normally produces, but in much higher quantities. Is stimulated by particularly the hormone FSH, and in Australia there are about 6 different brands. They're all equivalent, whatever your doctor might say, in terms of success rates. That FSH begins at the beginning of your menstrual cycle, and on a daily basis, in most situations, on a daily basis, you'll have an injection in your tummy, like a diabetic injection type situation, a tiny little needle, and that injection is absorbed into your body, stimulates the ovaries, and follicles, instead of just being 1 or 2, hopefully in most cases will produce 5 to 15, depending on your ovaries. During that time of the follicle development, the next thing you're going to experience is the monitoring. The monitoring varies from clinic to doctor, but in most cases, there'll be at least 2 or 3 blood tests on the way through, and you'll have ultrasound scans as you go through to watch the growth of the follicles. So those little round cystic things in the ovary which contain the eggs. Well, about 80% of them will contain eggs when we come to collect them. So that process of stimulation goes on for something in the order of 10 to 12 days as the average. Sometimes it's longer, occasionally it's shorter. In most situations, you'll also be prescribed a second injection whose job it is to stop you releasing those eggs before your doctor collects the eggs from the ovary. As the hormones rise, the body itself can take over the natural process of stimulating ovulation. So we need to stop that. And that's what the second injection is. In Australia, we have 2 such medications, cetrotide and orgalutran. They're both same, really, in terms of their outcomes. And the endpoint is to be able to time the collection of the eggs so that they're at their most mature stage. So you've been coming to the clinic for the monitoring. You will have been doing your injections at home. Our nurses will have taught you how to do the injections. The clinic nurses are always there on a almost not 24-hour basis, but certainly a day, to help you if you've got any concerns. Well, at least in the good clinics, that's the situation.
And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey podcast from the navigation menu.